there, welcome to my stance tutorial. Diving right in here, stance begins with the feet. So we want our feet placed on the floor at about pelvis width apart. And what does that mean? So pelvis width is referring to some bony landmarks on the pelvis that most of us are familiar with. You might call them your hip bones. They're your ASIS bones or bony prominences. So we want to find those hip bones on the top front of your pelvis and drawing a straight line or eyeballing a straight line down through there, we want to bisect the front of our ankle joints. So we can eyeball this usually pretty successfully, or we could use a simple little tool here, a little plumb line that I've constructed out of a shoelace and a couple of washers for weight. And so what I mean by a vertical line down from those hip bones is just that. So if I kind of pin that to my hip bone and just let it drop, I want to see that kind of bisect the front of the ankle there, as I said. So I've got it pretty well set there, not too bad. So if someone were standing with their feet wider than pelvis width apart, you can see that that plumb line then would fall inside the ankle. Of course, if I'm standing with my feet narrowly placed, that plumb line is going to land outside the ankle. So we want that plumb line to sort of pass through the ankle, and sometimes you get a bit of a surprise that that hips width is what it is, maybe wider or narrower than you have thought. So it's kind of useful to use this tool. Once you've got your feet placed hips distance apart there, you want to look at the angle or the orientation of your feet. So it's quite common for there to be a bit of a turnout. A lot of people have a bit of a turnout to their feet, and even with some effort towards making their feet so-called parallel, you might end up with something like this, where it looks like your toes are pointed forward. But if I were to sort of amplify this line with a longer edge, I'm just going to use my dome here. If I'm looking at the outer edges of my feet, and I've got that dome along there, you can kind of see if you were to continue that line, it's actually a fair bit of turnout. So I've already got my heels placed where I want them, so in this case maybe I'll just let the fronts of my feet angle more inward. And you can see there that that's a little bit closer to parallel. So oftentimes when we get people with their feet parallel, they sort of say, well, now I feel a bit knock-kneed. So I've actually got a little bit of this situation going on here. So you can see if I bend my knees, they actually get a little bit closer together than they are when I'm standing. And there are some people even who even when they're standing with their legs straight, those knees tend to be a little bit turned in. So what you've got happening there is an internal rotation of your femur bones, your thigh bones. So the fix is at the hips with a little bit of external rotation. So you're using these outer hip muscles here. Obturator externus is a big helper here to get those thigh bones turning outward or rotating externally with the goal of coming to neutral, okay? So getting those knee pits pointed straight back behind us, in other words. And once I've made that effort, got those muscles engaged, if I then do that knee bend test again, you can kind of see that things track a whole lot better there. So I've kind of taken care of that knock-kneed situation with that engagement of those outer hip muscles. But a vertical leg is not only desirable when viewed from the front of the body, we also want to get the side view of the leg vertical. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So just get that guy out of the way. Turning side on here now. Getting my feet pelvis width again, parallel again, and a great trick now that I'm along my mat here, as I most commonly would be in a class. I now have the outer edges of my mat to refer to. to create that parallel foot situation. And now I'm going to take my plumb line. I'm no longer referencing my ASISs, but rather my greater trochanter. So that's a bony prominence on your femur, your thigh bone, that is placed pretty well directly below your hip joint. So it's hard to feel your hip joint because it's deep, but you can feel this, very commonly feel this, and it's also sort of the widest part of your hip. So if I'm sort of sliding my hand down here, I'm going to encounter this greater trochanter. And I'm going to use that as a stand-in then for my hip joint. And if I want my hip joint over my ankle joint, I can just use the plumb line to see where that's at. Now, it's not too bad there. You can kind of see that that's falling like right along my ankle bone from that greater trochanter. I'll try and take the rotation out here. Quite commonly, if you're out and about, you're going to see a sort of a pelvis forward stance is a really common one. So you can see here I've kind of adopted that stance. And you can see by the plumb line where most of the work, most of the pressure, most of the weight is passing through my feet, more forward of my heel. Putting a lot of pressure, causing the toes to grip, maybe affecting the arch of the foot. And your foot's not really designed to operate that way. You've got a nice big dense heel bone for a reason, so let's have that weight passing through the heel. All right, so once we've got feet positioned, hips width and parallel, we've got maybe a little external rotation or a neutral femur anyway, and a vertical leg here. Just making sure that that leg and foot position leads up to a neutral pelvis with the ASIS and the pubic symphysis or pubic bone in the vertical plane for a neutral pelvis. And that's essentially stance. We can add in dropping the ribs, sliding them back, and as well some head ramping there, relaxing the shoulders, and there you have it.